After one of the most mesmerizing drives of his storied career, Max Verstappen arrives in Las Vegas with the opportunity of wrapping up his fourth Drivers' World Championship. It can all be won here this weekend on the famous Strip. Welcome to your weekend warm-up here in Las Vegas. And welcome to the roof here in the F1 Plaza. Welcome to Ruth Buscombe, to James Hinchcliffe, to Lawrence Barretto. And you guessed it, folks, it's freezing. It's very, very cold once again here in Vegas. But guys, what a weekend we have standing in front of us. Ruth, Max Verstappen can do it here this weekend. Great to be back in Vegas.
Oh, amazing to be back in Vegas. I mean, I don't think he's going to do the Travis Kelce singing, which maybe is best for all of us. But yeah, I can't wait. Can't wait to see what we're going to get.
Hinch, this is such a unique circuit, such a unique place for a race. There's nowhere like it in world sport.
I mean, there's no city like it, I think, on Earth, so it makes it pretty unique right off the bat. But, you know, last year coming in here with the first one, a lot of question marks. I think everybody left pretty satisfied. It was a heck of a race, a great Grand Prix, changes for the lead, passes on the last lap for podium positions. I think everybody's geared up for another really exciting race.
Yeah, can't wait for it. And Lawrence, it's not just what's going on track this weekend. There's been a lot happening off track just as Formula One's arrived in town.
It feels like Vegas has leveled up this year. I think this event has come on leaps and bounds. The local community have got some free tickets to come in and kind of explore what's going on. The unsung heroes have been rewarded as well. But there's also more general admission around here. You've got an ice rink up here on the roof with us. Thank God we didn't do the opening link on there, because you don't want to see me like Bambi on ice. But yeah, it really feels like this event has learnt from last year and really stepped on.
Yeah, absolutely. They've also delivered us some sensational jackets. Right, why don't we take a look back 1 week ago to Brazil. 1 week ago, one race ago. It feels like 1 week ago. This season has absolutely flown by. It has been a couple of weeks, though, since that very long weekend in Brazil. The rain arrived, as did one of the most incredible race drives you will ever see from Max Verstappen.
It's Super Sunday in Brazil, qualifying in the Grand Prix on the same day. Lando Norris at the front of the field with a golden opportunity. Max Verstappen 17th in the order.
Come on, mate, just chase him down.
The Sao Paulo Grand Prix is underway. The lead for George Russell. The Mercedes man gets by. The man on the charge, the championship leader on the attack. He's going past all of them, up to 11th, 9th, 7th. 5th place goes Max Verstappen. Sensational recovery drive.
Heavy rain now.
Drivers now living on their instincts, slipping and sliding all over the road.
We need to stay out, I think, Fox.
The top two cannot cope any longer.
It's an Alpine 1-3 right now. Verstappen second.
This is an inexplicable Grand Prix. Ooh, big crash into the wall for Colapinto.
Red flag. So everyone can just change tyres for free now. Should have stayed out.
We are back underway. Verstappen to the lead in Brazil. Norris has gone off the road. The moment that changes the World Championship. No one saw this coming. 17th on the grid to the win.
Oh, yes!
A defining drive. And Alpine have both cars on the podium. The world champion strikes back to put one hand on the championship trophy.
What a do.
It was a very long, very wet weekend in Brazil, but Hinch, listen, from a driver's perspective, just sum up what kind of a drive that was from Max Verstappen on a day when some drivers said they couldn't see, others were calling for the race to be halted. Max was perfect.
It was truly sublime. It was really incredible. I mean, we called it on the day. One of the best drives, as you said, you might ever see out of Max Verstappen, and that's saying something because he's got quite a few in the repertoire. But to tackle those conditions like that, you know, they always say that rain's the ultimate equalizer. The Red Bull has not had the pace that it had a year ago. Max isn't running away with races anymore until you equalize the field with rain. And it was so impressive to see how thoroughly he trounced the 19 other best drivers on Earth. It was incredible.
It really was something. Ruth, of course, the double podium for Alpine as well. Massive for them and their championship hopes as they raised 3 places up in the Constructors' Championship. Luck. Is it luck or is it great strategy call to have waited as long as they did and ultimately for the safety car to come out? Do you make your own luck in those kind of situations?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't Las Vegas, was it? It was Brazil. And, you know, these are the moments that are so hard fought. You know, it was an active decision. You know, you listen to the radio, you can see the team planned it. This is what they wanted to do. They stayed out. It was great decision making, great driving, great execution. Yeah. You know, both from Red Bull with that stunning drive and stunning race execution as well. Yeah. And obviously Alpine, I think it's thoroughly well deserved. And those two drivers, I've raced against them in the wet. They're both really annoyingly good in the wet if you're racing against them. So I have to say, you know, bravo to both those two as well.
And Lawrence, we do arrive here. Max Verstappen can win his 4th World Championship this weekend. What are the permutation? Because it's nigh on impossible for Lando now.
Well, yeah, Lando, when he was talking today, kind of was suggesting it is nigh on impossible. Essentially, Lando's got to finish at least 3 points ahead of Max to keep the championship alive, and even then it's just keeping it alive until the next race. So, look, the way that Max performed, particularly in the dry, I think, in Brazil, shows that maybe Red Bull have taken a step and it might be a bit tricky here, even if Ferrari and McLaren look strong around here.
Interesting stuff. Yeah, so if Lando fails to score, Max is champion. If Max beats Lando, Max is champion. And as Lawrence says, 3 points to the good for Lando. Pushes it on to Qatar. Why don't we hear from the man who could wrap up his 4th Drivers' World Championship this weekend, Max Verstappen.
Looks a bit better now in the championship, but we'll see this weekend. I mean, we have good hopes to be competitive, but I don't know, of course, how competitive. But I do feel that even in Brazil, in the dry, we were quite decent. Finally again in race pace. So this is, of course, a complete different track, completely different temperatures. But I just hope that we can continue that momentum a little bit. And there's plenty to race for still. You know, even in the constructors, I think there is a chance. So we'll see what we can do.
So that's Max Verstappen, your championship leader and potentially 4-time Drivers' World Champion this year. The battle for the constructors, those guys, rages on. Less than 50 points, covers 3 teams: McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull. Ruth, who is this circuit going to favour, do you think, given that the temperatures are so low, given what we saw last year, and given that for some teams, what proved to be an Achilles heel at other circuits actually played to their strengths last year? Do they still have that, or have they lost that?
Yeah, well, I mean, first off, I don't think anyone in Las Vegas is going to be betting against Max Verstappen this weekend in terms of pure driving skill, especially coming off the back of Brazil. But in terms of car performance, on paper, it's a Ferrari track, you know, and if you look at recent qualifying performance, Charles, king of Saturday, king of qualifying. I spoke to him this race weekend. I said, you know, I think I've got you as the winner. And then he said, don't jinx me. And I was like, no, it's just mathematically most likely based on car performance. So I think the Ferrari, based on the low-speed cornering round here, is the car to beat this weekend. But, you know, the great thing about Formula One this year is it's so close. Yeah. And actually, you know, a driver mistake, a setup mistake, you know, even just not getting those tyres into the right window here for one time lap. It's so tricky. It's such a balancing act. Actually, also setting the car up for qualifying and the race, we could get some surprises.
Hinch, last year, the Ferrari really struggled on their tyres throughout the season, burning through them. Oddly enough, that Achilles heel turned out to be their biggest asset here because the cooler temperatures negated that and put that in that position. They fixed that this year. Will that be their undoing?
No, I don't think so, because they were better than everyone else at it last year. Now let's call it even. They're on par with the rest of them, but their car is still suited well to this track. You look at tracks like Monza, like Baku, other long straights, kind of low downforce configurations. Ferrari's been up there. McLaren has as well, but remember, that was before they had to change that rear wing that was so tricky, maybe giving them a little bit of speed. So I think it's going to be tough for everybody. We got weirdly warm conditions on race day last year compared to the rest of the weekend. It was a few degrees warmer, I think, than people were expecting. If it's anything like it is tonight on Sunday, it's going to be noticeably more difficult for these teams to not just get the tires to the right temperature, but to maintain it throughout the stint. It's going to be a challenge for everybody, but I don't think it's going to be a weakness for Ferrari at all.
Lawrence, this has turned out to be a fascinating season. 3 teams in the hunt for the Constructors' World Championship. Who do you think the momentum is with right now?
I mean, Brazil makes it tricky, I think, because you can look, it was an outlier really in terms of the form book. I think McLaren generally have been the form team since Miami, really. So I feel like they've got the advantage. They're also leading, so I think Ferrari are chasing. They might have to take a few more risks to try and get that points gap down. Because yeah, okay, there's 140 odd points left on the table, but to get a 40 odd point swing is very, very difficult in that short space of time. So yeah, I think the momentum is with McLaren.
And all of that means that we expect Red Bull, who had such a dominant season last year, the most dominant season in Formula One history, to finish a best of third, more than likely, this year. It's a massive turnaround, a massive shock. We can't look beyond the fact that Max Verstappen has scored the vast majority of the points for that team. Hinch, a lot of talk in the paddock, remains over that second Red Bull seat for next season. A number of drivers looking in on that. Sergio Perez, obviously the incumbent, hopeful to stay there because he has that long-term contract. But the names, Liam Lawson and incredibly Colapinto, keep on coming up.
Yeah, I mean, it's, if you want to believe the report, it's the $20 million question, right? It's the proposed sponsorship that Checo brings, but also potentially what you could get out of Argentina if Colapinto gets the ride. It's such a difficult position to be in. I would be surprised, though, if, I know Colapinto's name's come up, I'd be surprised if they chucked him straight in a Red Bull. I mean, Lawson's been groomed by that program. He knows the people. They know him. He's got that killer instinct that Red Bull likes. He seems to be the better fit, and it could really upset the apple cart from his camp if he gets immediately passed over, if Checo is gone, and Colapinto goes in that seat. But it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. I don't envy the management at Red Bull having to navigate this situation.
No, it's a really, really tough one. But we can hear from some of the guys that are involved in that chatter down there in the plaza.
Sergio, a great performance from you here 12 months ago. What chances of a repeat this weekend, and what was it about this track last year that brought about that fantastic performance from you?
Yeah, I think last year we were looking very strong. I think we were able to come through the field with the incident I had in lap 1 and so on. We were able to come back and we ended up leading the race at some point, with fighting with Max, with Charles, all the way through the last lap. And yeah, it was a really enjoyable race, and I know that it's going to be quite intense, you know, in terms of fighting, in terms of breaking DRS and so on. It can be quite a complicated one.
Yeah, obviously the expectation on us is high, and the season's not done yet. So as much as there's indication on what they're wanting me to do and what the future holds, I don't have anything confirmed right now. So for me, it's just focusing on these races ahead. This weekend's the most important right now, and then that'll shift next weekend. So I'll have a clearer picture after the season.
It's been a long 3 weeks, but 3 weeks that we needed. So it's been going well. We did a lot of work with the guys in the factory, a lot of simulator. The mechanics have done an amazing job to bring the cars back here today, to have the 2 cars ready on the latest spec. I think it is very important. We are trying to extract and maximize every opportunity we have until Abu Dhabi, and you never know when it's going to be your last race. You have to enjoy every weekend, but also maximize them and give the best out of it. So yeah, it's always very important, and I'm come here, with the same mentality and the same will of doing well as a team. They have been working really hard to bring the 2 cars here. So yeah.
A reminder, of course, to lock your teams in for F1 Fantasy this weekend. A reminder to replace Ollie Behrman with Kevin Magnussen, who returns this weekend. If, like me, you replaced Kevin Magnussen with Ollie Behrman last weekend. And also, there's a mini-league for the Las Vegas Grand Prix weekend. If you do rather well in that, you could win tickets to join us here next year. So make sure you enter that one. This really is an incredible and very unique race weekend. Right, so the driver chat is what it is. Moving beyond that, we've touched on it very briefly already. Alpine, great job last time out. And Ruth, what a turnaround for their season. When they started off slowest, heaviest, no chance, no hopes, and now bam, straight up to 6th in the constructors, ahead of Haas, ahead of VCarb. An incredible day, an incredible job, an incredible turnaround for a team which had a new team boss halfway through the year in the form of Ollie Oakes.
Yeah, I mean, and it just goes to show how small those margins are in the midfield. It's just one race, and they'll all be looking at this place. Actually, it doesn't look like it's going to be wet, but it is, it is a land of a casino. There's a lot of things that can happen in this race, and I think each of those midfield teams are going to see this race weekend as extra important, coming off the back of Brazil, knowing that just one race result can change it. Alpine are going to be looking to defend that P6. You go down to the guys, they say it's going to be tough, but they're going to try it.
We saw Esteban as we were arriving at the track today. You said to him, do you think you can repeat what you did last year? Because he had a great race, and his response was...
different car. That was his response. Valid point. But the team was quick. Obviously, riding a high off of what happened in Brazil. But yeah, he's right. It is a different car. It's a different year. A lot changes in 12 months in Formula One. It's going to be tough to repeat that. But again, this is one of those races that could kind of get a bit of a history, a bit of a reputation for throwing up these interesting results.
And Lawrence, as we saw in Brazil, all it takes is one great result for those teams in that lower half of the order to really spring themselves up. Haas very much still in that fight, so too VCARB.
Yeah, I think it's that battle between VCARB and Haas was kind of a good focus in that mid part of the standings. They've now got Alpine there, and look, it's going to be 1 or 2 points that's probably going to make the difference now, unless we have another freak Brazilian Grand Prix weekend, which I would say, looking at the tracks coming up, is unlikely. I hope I haven't jinxed it there. But I think what would be really difficult is on a team like VCARB, who started really well this year, to end up P8 after that would be tough on them. But that's just how close the midfield is at the minute.
Yeah, it really is. Right, well, why don't we hear from one of our podium finishers?
Pierre, great seeing you smiling, because really the form of Alpine over these last few races has been incredible, especially that result in Brazil. Does it feel like now top 10 should be the bare minimum for the team at the minute?
I mean, bare minimum maybe not, but definitely the target. I think it's great to see, since we brought the upgrades in Austin, we've been able to fight for Q3s. On the last 3 races, we've been able to fight for the points, obviously get that amazing result in Brazil in specific conditions, but I'm definitely more optimistic going into that final triple-header, that we're going to be in the fight, and it's actually a very important fight for us that we are into now, that we 6 in the constructor, fighting with AlphaTauri and Haas.
Some changes in the pit lane this weekend. 3 brand new liveries. Sauber have a new livery. VCARB have a new livery. Alpine have a very pink livery. Any favourites out of those?
I mean, the VCARB reveal was the coolest by far. Getting the Entourage guys back involved. And yes, the car looks good too.
It looks like a Sauber. It looks like a mid-90s to mid-2000s
Yeah, I was thinking
Sauber,
that when Pedro Diniz, the Patronus one with the Red Bull logo on it.
Yeah, I had immediate mid-90s flashbacks with that. Beautiful looking cars. Also, I think somebody pointed out the 3 colours of the 3 Powerpuff Girls. So, sure. Moving on. Sauber still haven't scored a point this year. Ruth, your old team, can they turn their fortunes around in these final 3 races after the news that they have got their driver lineup sorted for next year? Bortoletto's in, which means that both Joe and Valtteri Bottas out of a seat.
Look, I mean, it's impossible when you work in Formula One teams to not get attached.
I loved your
to
post,
the drivers.
by the way.
Exactly.
I loved your post.
To not get attached to the drivers they are, because they become your family, and as a kind of like a team member, your future, your success of your career is intrinsically entwined with them. So like personally, you're always gutted when someone that you've worked with, or in this case 2 drivers you work with, at the moment seemingly out of a drive for next year. But what I would say is there's a freeing element of, if you've had this dark cloud hanging over you of like, will they, won't they? Actually, some of the best performances we've often seen from drivers, I think Kevin Magnussen is a great example, is when you have that weight lifted. And so potentially, I would love it if they could score a point and, got a new tattoo. Apparently it's real. I haven't fact checked that, but apparently it is real.
The tattoo says what's next. Lawrence, what do you understand could be next for Valtteri and Joe?
So I think for Valtteri, it's a Mercedes reserve role. I think they've been talking for several weeks now. They were talking before even the news came out that he might lose the seat. And look, he obviously knows the team really well. They could really do with a driver of his experience to kind of help them on their fight back towards the front. And it kind of keeps him in the picture, doesn't it, for another year, in the hope that either something comes up midway through the season, which has obviously happened multiple times this year, or into 2026. I think he
could fall into that like Della Rosa, Marc Genet role of being like that phenomenal test and reserve plugging away back at the factory on the sim, doing all the hard work.
Yeah, because De La Rosa's so plugged in, isn't he, there at Aston Martin, and like you said, Genet at Ferrari as well. And I think that's why the team is so keen to maybe potentially get a deal together for next year. I think it's tough, like you kind of hinted at, that he won't be on the grid. I think there was, for a long time, he thought he was. It felt like experience was what Sauber were going to go for. So to ultimately lose out, and he found out just before the announcement, after all of the rumours of Barretto had gone on for weeks, must have been difficult. But the fact that Mercedes are interested show that he's still got real value in the sport. And I think for Joe, just quickly, he said he's been talking to multiple teams about a reserve role for next year. He's more focused on staying in the sport and, again, the shop window thing, rather than going and find a race programme elsewhere. I think Formula E, there were a number of opportunities there, and he doesn't fancy that because he wants to try and make a go of it in F1.
Hinch, of course, Bortoletto's signing brings another rookie into the fold for next year. We're talking about Colapinto, we're talking about Lawson with seats, potentially one of them getting a seat for next year. We've got Bortoletto, we've got Antonelli, we've got Behrman, we've got a whole host of young drivers coming through. Is there something in the water? Is there a sea change in Formula One, or is it just, has the sport finally kind of figured out, you know what, we can take a risk on the young guys?
Yeah, I mean, if this year has taught us anything, it's that the rookies can get the job done. And, you know, you went from a season of 0 rookies to mid-season a couple to next year even more. It really is incredible. But I think it is a kind of a signal. It's a turning of the tide, right? You've got kind of that older generation. You've got your Alonsos, you've got your Hamiltons, even guys like Hülkenberg and Magnussen. They're getting up there in racing terms, right? You got your sort of middle-of-the-road guys, your Lando who's been around for a little while, your Max guys like that. But now this next tier is coming in. It's a lot of young, fast, talented, capable drivers coming in, and it's going to make it super exciting because we've seen what Behrman's done in terms of how people have gotten behind him and the kind of charge he's brought to that team. Same thing with Colapinto. Lawson did it last year already at VCarb, doing it again this year. So I'm excited to see what Antonelli does. I'm excited to see what Bortoletto can do. It's a really cool time for the sport.
And the first thing that they will do as full-time F1 drivers is all attend F1 75 next year, February, in London. It's sold out. Very, very quickly. So really, really excited for that. The first time in history that there will be a group launch, all 10 teams unveiling their liveries and their drivers and their team bosses and all of that at the start of the year. Why don't we hear from one of those more elder statesmen that you just mentioned earlier?
So Fernando, here we are, Sin City. Talk to me about the challenges of this racetrack, but also the prospects for the team this weekend.
Yeah, obviously it is a challenging circuit. All the street circuits at high speed, you know, a little bit like Baku, where braking is quite important. The walls are very close, so yeah, very easy to make a mistake, and something we need to avoid for sure and get into the rhythm. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting weekend. Obviously, there are a few weekends already that we don't score points, so this is the time to change that.
Now, there's been a lot of news over the last couple of weeks since we were last racing in Brazil. Firstly, the GPDA issued an open letter to the FIA president, quite critical of the way in which things are being done. There's no response as yet from the FIA on that. George Russell actually talking in the paddock earlier today, saying he's very hopeful that the drivers get a response on that after the president was elected on a sort of manifesto of transparency. So the drivers hoping to hear back on that, but also a new race director, Rui Marquez, will be in for the last 3 races, replacing Nils Wittig. Why don't we hear actually from George Russell and some of the things that he was saying earlier today?
Talking as a fellow driver as opposed to sort of my role with the GPDA, I think everybody felt with certain things that have happened over the course of this year that we wanted to sort of stand united. At the end of the day, we just want to be transparent with the FIA and have this dialogue that is happening. And I think, you know, the departure of Niels is also a prime example of not being a part of these conversations. And ultimately, we want to work with the FIA to make the best for the sport that we all love. So, I think it's kind of us now putting the pressure back on them to work with us and work with everyone, including F1 as well, just to maximise this opportunity which Formula One is in at the moment, which is, you know, an amazing time to be a part of.
Interesting stuff from George Russell. Right, folks, here's where you can catch everything here on F1 TV over your Las Vegas Grand Prix weekend. And it all kicks off tomorrow, Thursday, here in Las Vegas. Free practice 1 at 6:30. Free practice 2 coming your way at 10 p.m. Next day, same times, different sessions, 6:30 for free practice 3 and 10 p.m. for qualifying before the race itself. Saturday night, 10 p.m. under the lights in Las Vegas. Right, guys, thank you for bearing with me. It is Baltic up here. Let's get some very quick predictions from the three of you, and this might be one of the toughest ones to call of the year. Lawrence, start with you.
I think it's going to be a Max win. I think it's going to be tight between him and Charles, probably P2 and Lando P3.
Interesting stuff. Hinch?
I'm going to reverse the top two. I think Charles is going to win. I think Max going to be P2. But guys, don't sleep on Mercedes. I'm saying George Russell P3. That car's not great in the heat. Guess what? We don't have any of that here this weekend at all. No bumps. Good and slow corner. Doesn't like combined corners. Not a lot of combined corners. And I think George Russell's fired up. I think, he had good pace at times in Brazil, and I think he can do it here.
Like it. Ruth?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go Max, Charles, Carlos.
Max, Charles, Carlos. Interesting.
Will?
I'm going to say we will have a new leader of the Constructors' World Championship by the time we leave Las Vegas. And they will be the same colour as Lawrence's sweater. Right, folks, thank you so much for tuning into your weekend warm-up. Cannot wait for track action to start here in Las Vegas. My thanks to the three of you. My thanks to you. Enjoy the weekend here in Las Vegas.
The world's greatest sport awaits its newest stage as fight night like no other.
Welcome to Las Vegas.
The top two go off the road. Massive spin in the middle of the pack. Whoa, into the barriers. Back on the streets. Charles Leclerc, absolutely brilliant. Max Verstappen wins the Las Vegas Grand Prix.
Viva Las Vegas.
That's entertainment.